now that the indictment process is over and all this shit, fucking, I did it. I I do not care to admit that I did it.
We are gathered here to hold trial for the case number 23-CM-0103, State of San Andreas versus Frank Haswell. The defendant, Frank Haswell, is currently in trial for robbery of a government employee, tampering with evidence, and obstruction of justice. The narrative proposed by the prosecution to justify the aforementioned charges are based on the defendant allegedly taking items from his locker and the lockers of fellow employees and later on filling two bags with the presumed contents of said lockers, all while employed by the San Andreas Department of Corrections. Upon further inspection of the defendant's locker, it was concluded that there were items totaling $280,000 in value after he had already left with the mentioned bags. As such, the prosecution accuses the defendant of concealing evidence and stealing the mentioned contents. To all the charges, the defendant has pled not guilty. The court takes notice of the defendant, Frank Haswell, not being present under his own determination. The defendant had confirmed their assistance and is allegedly in town, but has expressed to representatives of the branch their unwillingness to attend. The wheels of justice must keep turning, and thus the trial will be initiated without the presence of them. And he also has waived his right to a public defendant. Be reminded that the evidence presented today on this court will be examined with a lot of rigor, especially given the circumstances that disallow it from being cross-examined. With that in mind, the court will now grant the prosecution the opportunity to present their opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. I stand before you today as the representative of the state of San Andreas to present the case against Frank Haswell. Mr. Haswell, a correctional custodial officer at the San Andreas Department of Corrections, is charged with GFO2, robbery of a government employee, GF16, tampering with evidence, and GM14, obstruction of justice. The evidence we presented will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Haswell misused his position and betrayed the trust placed in him. On August 17, 2023, then Captain Julia Whitehorse and Senior Correctional Officer Remy Raccoon discovered multiple knives scattered on the floor of the evidence locker at the Department of Corrections. This alarming discovery led to an immediate investigation, revealing that Mr. Haswell had introduced these knives into the locker room under suspicious circumstances. Mr. Haswell's statements and actions on the day in question, as captured by CCTV footage and corroborated by witness testimonies, demonstrates his culpability. Initially, he claimed to have found a bag in the front desk, which he subsequently placed in the evidence locker. However, CCTV footage shows that no bag existed at the front desk. Instead, the footage clearly depicts Mr. Haswell handling a bag from which the knives spilled out, contradicting his initial statement. Furthermore, after the discovery, Mr. Haswell was seen retrieving 2 bags from his personal locker and transferring clothing items into these bags. Notably, the clothing was rolled in a way where it could be used to conceal other items. This suspicious behavior continued until Mr. Haswell clocked off duty, prompting further investigation into his personal locker. The search yielded an extensive array of items, including multiple bags and a briefcase, all hinting at illicit activities. Subsequent investigations uncovered that on August 20th, 2023, ex-SADOC Corporal Jack Goodnight reported missing personal belongings from his locker. It was later discovered that Mr. Haswell had retrieved these items without authorization, further implicating him in theft and misconduct. The evidence against Mr. Haswell is overwhelming. The witness statements from Captain Julia Whitehorse and Sergeant Remy Raccoon, combined with the CCTV footage and the detailed inventory of items found from Mr. Haswell's locker, paint a clear picture of his guilt. Mr. Haswell's actions not only violated the trust of his colleagues and the institution, but also endangered the security and integrity of the Department of Corrections. It is crucial that we hold the defendant accountable for his actions to maintain the integrity of our justice system and ensure those entrusted with upholding the law do not exploit their positions for personal gain. I urge you to consider the evidence presented and deliver a verdict that reflects the seriousness of these offenses. Thank you.
With that in mind, all of the evidence has been presented. I will allow the prosecution to present their closing statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, the prosecution has presented a clear and compelling case that demonstrates beyond a reasonable doubt the guilt of the defendant, Frank Haswell. The evidence and testimony provided throughout this trial leave no room for doubt regarding his actions and intentions. Firstly, let's consider the incident at hand. Mr. Haswell was found in possession of items from a locker that did not belong to him. When the defense claims that Mr. Haswell had permission to take these belongings, we must scrutinize the credibility and reliability of the witness statement provided. The prosecution has established that there were significant inconsistencies and dubious circumstances surrounding this so-called permission, including the 5 times that he agreed that no one was allowed to go in this, including the fact that the interview was done with his own volition, including the fact he has been trespassed, refused admission to multiple government agencies, and has been arrested on DOC property multiple times since the incident. Jack Goodnight, who allegedly granted Mr. Haswell permission, as we stated, has a history of criminal behavior and instability. His multiple arrests and erratic conduct cast serious doubt on the veracity of his statement, and moreover, it is plausible that a person with such a background would have the ability or reliability to permit the removal of items from a secure locker. Furthermore, as the defense has failed to show or failed to provide substantial evidence to corroborate Mr. Haswell's claims, there are no credible witnesses or documentation to support the notion that he had rightful access to the locker contents. This lack of clear and convincing evidence from the defense only strengthens the prosecution's case. In addition, the behavior of Mr. Haswell during the incidents raises significant concerns. His actions were not consistent with those of someone who believed they had legitimate access to the items. Instead, his behavior was indicative of someone attempting to cover up their unauthorized actions, as seen in his contradicting statements to the investigators, as well as the way in which he rolled up and the way in which he behaved with the knives on the ground. The prosecution would like to take one final moment to review each charge as it stands. GFO2, robbery of a government employee, was provided and proved in multiple exhibits to show the defendant did in fact access a locker he did not have permission to access. Upon further review of the footage and locker room, the prosecution also proved that the locker in question that had items removed from it was that of Correctional Officer Jack Goodnight. While Mr. Goodnight was still considered a reliable witness, he provided a statement to the Department of Corrections willingly. The statement provided detailed how the defendant did not have permission to access his locker or remove items. The prosecution feels we successfully impeached the defense's witness and therefore recognize that a reasonable person would find the defendant guilty of GFO2, robbery of a government employee, based on the provided evidence. Moving on to the charge of GF16, tampering with evidence, it is clear in the CCTV and interview footage provided that the defendant did take items from lockers he did not have permission to access. He removed these items from property and have not been returned to the state. The law GF 16 states an act in which a person alters, conceals, falsifies, or destroys evidence with the intent to interfere with an investigation by a law enforcement, governmental, or regulatory authority. The prosecution feels that by destroying evidence in the incinerator, which he admitted to verbally, removing the items he stole from the locker, keeping said items as he leaves SADOC, and finally not providing them to the state, in the end constitutes a clear violation of the law, as he is concealing and destroying any evidence that might have linked him to the crime further. Finally, we'd like to review the charge GM14, obstruction of justice. Not only did the individual leave the premise and therefore stop law enforcement from searching or questioning him effectively, but also the defendant gave false and misleading statements to the investigator. These two actions in conjunction allow the prosecution to feel they have also met their burden of proof for the charge GM14. In conclusion, as each charge has been reviewed specifically in accordance with the actions committed by the defendant, the prosecution has successfully met their burden of proof. No reasonable person would believe that the defendant had access or permission to remove items, and his clear dodging of law enforcement and hiding of items only seeks to prove the point of the prosecution. To that effect, we ask the courts to uphold justice and find the defendant guilty on all counts. Thank you.
After deliberation, the court has reached a verdict for the case number 23-CM-0103, State of San Andreas versus Frank Haswell. The prosecution has argued that the defendant misused his position within the Department of Corrections as a custodian officer to obtain access to items that not belonging to him and remove them off DOC's premise. The prosecution has proved that the defendant provided statements that were untrue when questioned about the origin of the alleged knives that were left at the lobby of the DOC. The court also finds that the defendant did in fact move items from within a locker not belonging to them or to a colleague either. Along with that, the items found within the defendant's locker are of such nature that only lead the court to believe that items were retrieved from either inmate or colleagues' lockers, as the court believes that a public servant would not have any reason to store, among others, items such as stamps, tin ore, dirty inmate laundry, numerous pickaxes, and more. The court recognizes the efforts made by the prosecution to impeach the witness, Jack Goodnight, and the statement provided in which he subsequently affirms that the defendant had been allowed to retrieve their item. However, the court finds that these written statements are in contradiction of what was provided and asked numerous times during interrogation. The court is inclined to believe that the written statement provided after the fact is not truthful and thus will consider that the retrieval of the items conducted the court will consider that the retrieval of the items conducted by the defendant was not authorized. The court believes, then, that it has been proved beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, Frank Haswell, took the property of another person off of them without uncoerced consent, as described in our penal code. Situation which is aggravated by the fact that the victim of said acts was employed by the government. However, the court believes that the prosecution has failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the acts committed by the defendant had the intention of interfering with an investigation. It is clear that the defendant had the intention of stealing items, retrieving them without having knowledge of whether they were part of an investigation, for his own benefit, which leads the court to believe that there was no intent of tampering with an ongoing investigation when the items were moved outside of the OC's facility. However, it is clear that the defendant did interfere, delay, obstruct, or otherwise lie to the authorities that questioned him about the origin of the knives and the events revolving these and the other items. With these considerations in mind, the verdict of this court is as follows. On the count of GF02, robbery of a government employee, I find the defendant, Frank Haswell, guilty. On the count of GF16, tampering with evidence, I find the defendant, Frank Haswell, not guilty. And finally, on the count of GM14, obstruction of justice, I find the defendant, Frank Haswell, guilty.
Where's the ping?
Hey, so am I good work for this? Or?
You chose to self-represent yourself in your trial and not turn up to the trial. First question is, what was your reason for wanting self-representation instead of either a state attorney or a private attorney?
Woodlaw went fucking MIA for my case. State attorneys, they're already spread thin as is, and representing each and every person in the state. So, you know, I wanted to take the chance, because truthfully, I didn't want to fucking overwork the defense. But you know,
And you were
didn't matter who
confident.
was.
And you were confident in your own skills to be able to represent yourself. Do you think?
I was confident enough. Yeah.
And what was your reasoning behind not showing up to the trial today, either as the defendant and the defense, I guess?
San Andreas Judicial Branch has some people that, you know, they pick and choose what they want to enforce in the Constitution. All this shit with Langley and all this shit with, you know, going on with Herman and Andy and other people. I saw, you know, what's the point in entertaining this nonsense? Being locked up for almost an hour in the fucking courtroom when I could just, you know, enjoy my last bits of freedom for the next little bit and just do what I wanted instead of fucking hearing the same shit over and over again and hearing McFornell pick and choose what parts of the Constitution get enforced and what don't.
So just for the people that aren't aware and haven't read the entire docket, you're specifically referring to the parts about a speedy and fair trial within the Constitution that I believe you put in a motion to dismiss based on that?
Yeah, that is not something that gets enforced at all in this state. Because I am one, and I am a prior felon, the prosecution, former Attorney General Hope Kant, decided that, you know, my rights were not as important as anybody else's because I was a quote-unquote danger to society. Meanwhile, the charges alleged are robbery. First of all, I did not rob anybody. I stole. There was no coercion involved. Second of all, everything else is non-violent. So I don't know what the fuck she's waffling about.
Okay, so this is you saying that you did actually do those things. Now you've been charged with them, I guess. You know.
Yeah, now that the indictment process is over and all this shit, fucking, I did it. I do not care to admit that I did it. But there's something that prosecution and Julia fucking Whitehorse, you fucking piece of human garbage, there's something that they don't know, and that's exactly how much.
What was your motivation behind doing these things? Was it just you needed cash, or the thrill of it, or what would you say the reason was?
So the reason for me doing it, I'm gonna be honest. It was a spur of the moment thing. I just saw an opportunity and I did it.
Well, you say that, but wasn't this over quite a large amount of time where you
Oh,
had
yeah,
taken
yeah.
things out of multiple people's lockers in person?
2-3 months. It was a spur of the moment thing the first time.
Oh, I see.
And, you know, I didn't get caught the first time, so I kept doing it. And I kept doing it. And I kept doing it. And then I, you know, started using a system where I'd have, you know, 2 cars parked at DOC at all times. HR didn't like it, but I did. One of them was filled with crates and bags. The other one was just my normal work vehicle, or the vehicle I brought to work. And while I was on shift, you know, I'd take shit, move it to the car, clock off, head down to the pawn shop, offload it, and come back.
So this was an entirely solo endeavor that you did by yourself.
100%.
And where do you think you slipped up with that in the end? Because obviously you'd got an investigation internally with DOC and Julia that then escalated. Where do you think you slipped up?
Yeah, so I know exactly where I slipped up. I had a bag full of knives, right? And
Yes, the 10 knives. That was evidence.
yeah. I didn't really want to, I had no reason to keep it, but I needed a bag. So what I did, I got sloppy. I thought that, you know, what are the chances someone's going to walk in here? Because I'm at the front desk. I was alone for hours on hours. What are the chances that someone's going to walk in here? I fucking drop all the knives on the floor for a bit, fill up a bag, bring it over to my truck, and I see fucking Remy and I see Julia in the locker room, and yeah. And then they blocked off the locker room for the rest of the investigation. So
Okay. Is there any regrets from doing those initial actions, or is your only regret that you got caught?
no,
No, as in no regrets. Okay.
no.
And you were caught very speedily after the court case ended, like within minutes. How did that come across?
That was a very unfortunately timed event. I had crashed my bike, and then somebody with a gun decided that they were going to go on a killing spree or tried to shoot me. Oh, they shot me twice, once in the shoulder, once in the head.
Oh, so just really poor timing. If you had your way,
Yeah.
you'd have been free a little bit longer until court.
I'd have been free a little bit longer, you know. I might have just taunted them a little bit, you know.
Okay, so you were charged with the guilty verdict for robbery of a government employee. You've already said your piece with that part, that you disagree that it's robbery. And then you were charged with obstruction of justice. Do you agree with that one?
I don't see how well, I guess that one's kind of valid. I did lie during an IA investigation, but fucking, I actively skirted attempts to contact me during the IA investigation, so I guess letter of the law, fucking, I did obstruct attempts to serve justice.
And then the last one was tampering with evidence. You were found not guilty of that one. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I didn't tamper with evidence. There was no ongoing investigation or evidence to be had that I tampered with. They had all the evidence, and I made no efforts to interfere with that evidence.
Another question I have is, you were employed as a CCO, a correctional custodian officer at DOC during your time of doing all of this. That's how you had access. Did you join, you need a cough drop, did you join in the first place with the intention of this, or did you join for normal reasons and then, as you said, opportunity moment?
I joined for a different reason. I'm not going to say specifically what that reason was, but it was not my express intent from the get-go to steal.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add, or have the viewers know that I haven't covered already?
I mean, sure. If y'all are wondering exactly how much I stole, because When I tell people, they're like, how the fuck did you steal that much? It was in the realm of 800 to 950,000.
And was that from 1015s? Was that from lockers? What was that from?
All lockers. I didn't take directly from people.
Was it employees' lockers or inmates' lockers or a mixture?
Inmates, current employees, past employees. And remember, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, Herman and Andy are innocent. The state of San Andreas is fucked up beyond all repair. And, you know, each and every day that passes, that woman in the fox mask becomes more and more correct. So just don't be a sheep. Use your own brain. Make choices for yourselves. Fuck the law. The law backs up these fucking corrupt motherfuckers. So yeah, while I was a correctional custodial officer, I was also the head of the correctional medical team. During that time, I was also a convicted torturer, murderer, hostage taker, and I was basically barred from working for any sort of medical position. If you were to ask LSAMS, they would say, you know, what the fuck are you joking? But yeah, it's funny that they let a convicted torturer and murderer and hostage taker, kidnapper, whatever the fuck, be head of medicine.
That's interesting.
It surely did not lead to any hijinks or shenanigans.
Is that sarcasm or is that earnest? It didn't lead to anything.
That is me being facetious.
Gotcha. Thank you for clarifying. Okay. Thank you very much for the interview, Frank. I appreciate it.